I'm sorry, ma'am. We don't have anything available at your price point. That's what the woman at the front desk said. Flat. Professional. Scripted. It was 7:42 p.m. on a drizzly Thursday in Chicago, and the Harrington Grand Hotel, a 5-star downtown property with gold-trimmed luggage carts and $22 cocktails, had just made its biggest mistake. Because the woman they were turning away? She didn't just belong there. She owned the company that processed the hotel's payment system. Her name was Jade Montgomery. Black. CEO of Evoltech, a global digital infrastructure firm that handled everything from secure check-in kiosks to financial transaction encryption for luxury chains just like this one. She wasn't wearing diamonds. She wasn't followed by handlers or press. She walked in solo, in a gray wool coat and scuffed black boots, her hair pulled back and her phone still buzzing with Slack notifications. To the receptionist, Jade looked like someone hoping for an upgrade. Not someone accustomed to owning the penthouse. There must be a mistake, Jade said calmly. I have a reservation. Under Montgomery. The front desk clerk, white, mid-20s, lip gloss perfectly reapplied, raised one eyebrow and began typing half-heartedly. Then, without even checking her screen. Sorry, ma'am. We're fully committed tonight. And we require payment before check-in, not after. She added that last part louder. Loud enough for the guests in the lobby to hear. Jade didn't flinch. I never asked to pay after. I booked this suite 2 weeks ago. It's already charged to my account. Why don't you check again? That's when the manager showed up. His name tag read, Zachary. Hair slicked back. Tan blazer. Expensive watch. And the kind of voice that sounds like it's been trained to say, that's policy, without ever thinking. He stepped between Jade and the desk. Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to step aside while we help other paying guests. Before we go deeper, let me ask you something. Have you ever walked into a place knowing you paid your way, earned your place, built your name, only to have someone look you up and down and decide you didn't belong? Have you ever had to prove who you are, not because of your credentials, but because someone couldn't picture someone like you having power? If you've ever felt that, then you already know what comes next. If this story already hits you in the chest, hit that like button, subscribe, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from, because someone else needs to hear what happens next. Back at the desk, Jade smiled. But it wasn't the warm kind. It was the kind of smile that knows exactly what's coming, and who's about to regret it. Are you refusing to check me in because of how I look? Zachary raised a hand. Ma'am, we're not obligated to disclose availability to walk-ins. And we reserve the right to deny service if we feel. I'm not a walk-in. Jade pulled out her phone and swiped open the app. This is your confirmation email. This is the $1,720 authorization on my card. This, she pointed to her name, is the same name on the company that built your hotel's point-of-sale system. That made the clerk freeze. Just slightly. Zachary scoffed. You're saying you work for some tech vendor? Jade slowly slid her leather wallet back into her coat. No. I own it. Still, he didn't move. Didn't apologize. Didn't even check the system. He simply tilted his head and said, Look, I don't want to argue, but you people always try this. You flash a business card. Claim some connection. We've been trained not to fall for that. The lobby fell quiet. The couple waiting behind Jade took a step back. The bellhop turned away. And Jade? She didn't argue. She didn't explain. She didn't even correct him. She turned, walked out of the lobby, and didn't look back. Not yet. At 8:26 p.m. Jade sat in the back of a black Lexus sedan, her laptop open, her fingers flying. Call legal, she texted her VP. Wake up acquisitions. We've got a building to buy. By 9:14 p.m., a call was placed to the Sandro Group, a holding company that had just taken over the Harrington's debt financing. By 10:03 p.m., a payment was made. And by 11:47 p.m., the parent company of the Harrington Grand had signed an emergency bridge agreement with the Vaultec Real Estate Holdings. And by morning, the staff of the Harrington Grand woke up to a new welcome packet on the front desk counter. No memo. No warning. Just one bold sentence printed in gold on linen paper. Welcome to the Coleman Montgomery Collection. A new era begins today. It was 7:32 a.m. The Harrington Grand Hotel lobby was just starting to wake up. Fresh coffee brewed behind the marble bar. The doorman straightened his lapel pin. A small wave of guests shuffled past the concierge, dragging wheeled suitcases and snapping at yawning kids. And behind the front desk? Zachary, the manager who had told Jade Montgomery to step aside, stood sipping from a mug that read "Teamwork is luxury." He didn't see the security guards until it was too late. 3 men in black suits. Earpieces. Serious expressions. One had a clipboard. Are you Zachary Linton? He blinked. Nodded. We need you to step aside. Now! Zachary laughed. What is this, a joke? I'm the operations manager. One of the guards tapped his earpiece and replied. Ms. Montgomery has arrived. Across the lobby, the doors whooshed open. In walked Jade. Same gray wool coat. Same confident stride. Only this time? She wasn't carrying a reservation. She was carrying authority. Everyone watched. The concierge froze. The bellhop dropped a set of keys. Even the barista stopped frothing milk. Jade didn't stop walking until she was behind the front desk. She turned, faced Zachary, and handed him an envelope. This is your formal termination notice. Effective immediately. For cause. He blinked. Wait, what? You can't. I can. She leaned in, voice steady. You told me I wasn't welcome here. You didn't check the system. You didn't ask questions. You made assumptions, the kind that get expensive. She stepped aside and let her new director of guest services take her place behind the desk. The linen welcome packet was now stacked neatly where the old check-in cards had been. A fresh sign had been printed in elegant serif font. The Coleman Montgomery Collection welcomes all guests equally. No exceptions. No excuses. Jade turned back one last time. Security will walk you out. Oh, and Zachary, you were right about one thing. He paused, halfway to the exit. She smiled. We don't fall for that anymore. By 9 a.m., the news had reached every major business blog in the city. Black CO Jade Montgomery acquires Harrington Grand overnight following discrimination incident. Tech titan buys building that refused her room. From rejected guest to owner in under 12 hours. At 10:04 a.m., an emergency call was scheduled with the hotel's former investors. Jade didn't attend. Her lawyer did. And they made it very clear. Your client breached multiple civil rights policies. Our client honored her dignity with dollars. This conversation is over. Upstairs, in the newly renamed Jade Presidential Suite, a team of designers were already walking the space, redesigning the look, rewriting the feel, and relabeling every outdated nameplate in the building. Jade stood on the balcony, coffee in hand, watching the city buzz below. She didn't need to yell. She didn't need to explain. She didn't need to prove anything. Because the building itself would do that for her now. And back at the front desk, the new concierge welcomed an elderly black couple with a warm smile. Welcome to the Montgomery Grand. Can I help you with your luggage? The husband laughed. We just want to shake her hand. The concierge grinned. Get in line. It was supposed to be a simple rebranding. New signage. New uniforms. New tone. Jade Montgomery had taken over the Harrington Grand less than 36 hours after they denied her a room. Now she was preparing to audit the entire hotel chain, 16 properties across the U.S. under the Harrington Hospitality Group, all now under the umbrella of Coleman Montgomery Holdings. But something wasn't adding up. On Monday morning, a junior staffer named Elena, barely 24 and sharp as steel, knocked on Jade's office door with a file in hand. You asked us to pull historical employment records and HR complaints going back 10 years. There's something you should see. She handed Jade a red folder. No label. Just a post-it. The name Montgomery shows up in 2004. Jade's eyes narrowed. She flipped open the folder. And there it was. Employee disciplinary file. Robert Montgomery, security staff, terminated June 2004. She froze. Her father's name. Robert Montgomery. Navy veteran. Worked 2 jobs after leaving the service. Never talked much about why he stopped doing security work. And now she was looking at a photocopy of the complaint that got him fired. It read, Mr. Montgomery was terminated for repeated tardiness and insubordination. But that didn't track. Not with the man who used to shine his shoes the night before every shift. Not with the man who taught her that early is on time. She flipped the page. That's when she saw the complaint that led to the firing. Employee reported manager for making discriminatory remarks regarding black guests. Claim could not be substantiated. Employee reassigned and later terminated for unrelated conduct issues. Jade sat back. A long silence filled the room. She stared out the window, heart pounding. This wasn't just her story anymore. It had been happening in this building before she had a name. And they buried it. She picked up the phone. Called legal. I need every internal report ever filed at the Harrington Group. Especially claims dismissed without investigation. Legal hesitated. That's over 400 files. Then start reading. That afternoon, Jade met with her executive team in the newly converted Equity and Dignity boardroom, the old ballroom now turned into the company's core innovation space. She dropped the folder on the table. My father worked here. He was fired for standing up against what they told me to step away from 20 years later. They didn't just ignore him. They silenced him. Silence around the table. Then one of the directors, a Latina woman named Celeste, whispered, This place didn't just discriminate. It recycled the behavior. Jade stood. Her voice was steady, but something had shifted in her eyes. I came here to prove a point. Now, I'm building a legacy. She announced a sweeping internal project called The Ledger, a digital platform that would collect, anonymize, and publish all prior discrimination claims at every property acquired by her firm. No red tape. No corporate fluff. Just truth. The industry panicked. Bloggers called it a radical transparency model. Legal analysts warned of defamation lawsuits. One anchor on a business network said, She's playing with fire. What hotel wants to publicly admit wrongdoing? Jade responded with one line on social media. The kind that wants to stop doing it. Back at her office, Elena returned with more files. She held out a note. I thought you should see this too. It was handwritten. Old. Faded. A note her father had once written on a staff feedback card. Treat every guest with dignity, even when the people above you don't. Robert M. Jade's hands trembled for the first time in days. Not with rage, but with the knowledge that her fight had started long before she took her first step into that lobby. The Ledger launched at midnight. By 8 a.m., It had already logged over 312 historical complaints across 5 hotel properties, all publicly viewable. Discrimination, bias in service, profiling, racial slurs caught in audio transcripts, sexual orientation, discomfort, notes handwritten by former managers. Complaints that had once disappeared quietly now stared the public in the face. And Jade Montgomery didn't blink. Headlines ignited. CO airs hotel chain's dirty laundry, publicly. Radical honesty or corporate suicide? Transparency bombshell shakes hospitality sector. Some called her brilliant. Others called her reckless. One luxury hotel group quietly paused its IPO. But none of them could ignore her. In the lobby of the Montgomery Grand, a black woman in her 60s walked up to the concierge. "My son's getting married next year. I told him we're not booking anywhere but here." The concierge smiled. "We're honored. Would you like a tour of the Coleman Suite?" She nodded, then paused. "Tell Ms. Montgomery she just reminded this city what pride looks like." But while the public embraced Jade's stand, not everyone was cheering. At 10:13 a.m., she received a message from her assistant. "There's someone here asking for a meeting. Says it's urgent." From Hargrove and Bell Capital. Jade froze. That name meant something. Hargrove and Bell, the same firm that had rejected her pitch 12 years ago when she first founded Evoltech. The same boardroom where a gray-haired partner had once smirked at her presentation and said, "You're sharp, Ms. Montgomery. But this isn't really a space for passion. It's a numbers game." They'd laughed her out of the room. Now, they were in her lobby. She walked down herself. He was standing near the piano, suit crisp, tie tight, expression tense. "Ms. Montgomery," he said. "It's good to see you again." Jade didn't offer her hand. "I'd say the same, but you were part of the reason I had to do all this without help." He nodded sheepishly. "We've been watching your work. We're impressed. The ledger is revolutionary. And, frankly, if you ever consider franchising this model, we'd love to talk investment." She stared at him, dead in the eye. "You want to buy into the table I had to build from scratch after you locked the doors on me? You don't get to be impressed now." He shifted awkwardly. "Well, even revolutions need partners." Jade raised an eyebrow. "Is that what you think this is? A revolution?" "No." She stepped closer, voice calm but sharp as broken glass. "This isn't a revolution. This is a correction. Of every silence, every dismissal, every smirk." She turned to walk away, paused, then added, "You want to be part of something? Start by apologizing publicly for the voices you ignored when they were whispering the truth you're only hearing now because it's loud." Back upstairs, Shiloh burst into the office. "Ma'am, we just hit 1.2 million site visitors. In under a day. Also, 3 other CEOs have reached out. 1 wants to license the ledger. 2 want you to teach their teams." Jade smiled faintly. "Tell them they can't just buy the software. They have to live the standard." That evening, Jade hosted a town hall at the hotel ballroom. Guests, staff, media, local leaders. She opened with no fanfare. Just a microphone and her story. "My father died before he could see this place change. But he died knowing his daughter would finish what he started. This building tried to erase him. Then it tried to erase me. Now, his name is on the corner suite. And mine is on the deeds." People stood, clapped, cried. Not for the hotel, for what it now represented. And later that night, alone in her office, Jade looked at the wall. A new plaque had been installed. Simple, elegant, heavy, to those who were turned away before they could tell their story. This building now speaks for you. Jade Montgomery had never planned to become a symbol. She didn't ask for a movement, didn't chase the spotlight. All she wanted was the room she'd paid for. A place to sleep. A little dignity. But now she stood at the edge of something much bigger, something louder than business and deeper than policy. And the world was watching. The invitation arrived in a gold-lined envelope, hand-delivered by a courier wearing gloves. It read, "The Global Hospitality Leadership Summit cordially invites Ms. Jade Montgomery to deliver a keynote address in Zurich, Switzerland, on the future of equity in international service." She stared at the card for a long time. Zurich. The same city where, 4 years ago, a hotel receptionist took her luggage to the wrong guest and apologized by offering her a free coffee voucher. The same city where she'd pitched a digital equity model and been told, "Let's not politicize luxury." And now they wanted her front and center. She said yes. On the flight over, Jade reviewed slides with Shiloh, who sat beside her with a laptop open and a nervous tapping finger. "They say your talk is scheduled after the vice president of Opulent Group," Shiloh whispered. "He's already made a statement against the ledger. Called it toxic transparency." Jade didn't look up from her screen. "Then we'll make sure he hears what truth sounds like in surround sound." The conference was held inside a marble-angled fortress that called itself a hotel, but functioned more like a private country. White-glove staff. Translators on standby. Security at every hallway. The ballroom could fit 2,000, but the air felt filtered through money and expectation. By the time Jade walked on stage, the room was already full. Her heels echoed across the polished floor as she approached the podium. No slides. No teleprompter. Just a single microphone and an audience filled with CEOs, investors, and critics who thought they knew who she was. She cleared her throat, then spoke into the mic with a voice sharpened by 6 weeks of silence finally broken. "I'm not here because of what I built," she began. "I'm here because of what they tried to tear down." She paused. "I wasn't always a CEO. I was a daughter of a man who lost his job for protecting a guest. A woman who was denied a room, then denied a reason. And when I was told I didn't belong, I didn't shout. I didn't threaten. I signed the contract to buy the building." Half the room stiffened. Cameras clicked. One executive in the front row raised a brow, whispered something into his translator's headset. "I launched the ledger because secrets are the currency of discrimination. And transparency is the only thing that ever bankrupts that system. If that's toxic, as some have said, then maybe it's time to let the old guard choke on it." You could hear a pin drop. Later, during the Q&A, a man in a charcoal suit stepped up to the mic. "Ms. Montgomery, do you worry that exposing internal complaints this openly will damage the luxury industry?" Jade didn't hesitate. "If truth damages your brand was built on a lie." He sat down without another word. Backstage, Shiloh was buzzing. "You just hijacked the entire conference. Twitter's losing its mind. CNN's already quoted you. And, wait, someone just donated $500,000 to the Ledger project under your father's name." Jade exhaled slowly, letting the moment land. She hadn't planned to say his name on stage. She never needed to. He was in E. But the pushback wasn't over. Later that evening, she received a formal letter from the International Hospitality Consortium. Cloaked in legalese, it hinted that publicizing historical misconduct could lead to long-term instability in trust-based service sectors. In other words, they wanted her to stop. She didn't. Instead, she sent back a one-line reply. "I'm not interested in preserving the industry. I'm interested in preserving people." The following morning, she was interviewed on the steps of the Summit Hall by a BBC reporter. "Do you see yourself as an activist now?" they asked. Jade looked into the camera. "No. I see myself as a hotel guest who stopped apologizing for making people uncomfortable with the truth." And as she stepped into her car, headed back to the airport, she turned once more to Shiloh and said, "You know what the next step is?" Shiloh shook her head. "We don't just buy the building. We build the chain. Global. Transparent. Untouchable." The vision was clear now. This wasn't a victory tour. This was an empire in motion. Jade Montgomery landed in New York to headlines that felt like an ambush. Evoltech faces backlash over Ledger model. Privacy concerns spark lawsuit threats. Luxury hotel group accuses Jade Montgomery of defamation. CEO or crusader? Critics say Montgomery's reforms could destabilize hospitality industry. She'd been gone 5 days. 5 days was all it took for the old world to start fighting back. While she was electrifying Zurich with her keynote, a storm had been brewing stateside. The charge? That, the Ledger, her public-facing equity and complaint database, violated non-disclosure agreements and tarnished brand value. At the center of it all was a billion-dollar competitor, Van West International, a chain of high-end resorts whose founder, Reginald Van West, had once told a magazine he saw no need for diversity audits in spaces of curated luxury. Now, his lawyers were threatening to sue. Jade didn't flinch. She'd expected it. You don't shine a floodlight on centuries of velvet-wrapped discrimination and expect the people in the shadows to clap. You expect them to panic. And panic they did. By the time she walked back into the Montgomery Grand's newly renovated executive lounge, her legal team was already waiting. "Reginald's team is claiming breach of industry protocol," said Cassandra, her general counsel. "They're demanding a full takedown of the Ledger and a formal apology." "Do we owe them one?" Jade asked, not looking up from her phone. "No." "Then I won't give one." But it wasn't just legal pressure that worried her. It was the quiet betrayal. As she scanned internal reports, one name kept popping up. Arthur Bell, the COO of a former partner firm, had been leaking internal analytics to Van West. Charts, engagement stats, user heat maps from the Ledger interface. All funneled out under a dummy Gmail account registered to T. Bailey 1939. The betrayal stung. Not because it was unexpected, but because Arthur was one of the few industry veterans who'd once told her he believed in her. He just hadn't believed enough to stand beside her when it got real. Jade called a full executive meeting the next morning. No press. No frills. Just people. Her people. She stood at the head of the table in the new innovation wing and laid it out plainly. "They want to shut us down. They want to scare our users. They want to rewrite the truth because it doesn't sell well on white linen." Then she reached into her bag and pulled out a black folder. Inside was a printed contract proposal. "I'm acquiring a stake in the National Hospitality Workers Union. 40% ownership. We'll digitize their complaint process, build out a real-time workplace tracker, and give their members access to legal support through the Ledger's framework." There was a pause. Then thunder. Applause. Cheers. Laughter. One executive stood and said, "They're not gonna like this." Jade smiled. "I'm not here to make them like it. I'm here to make them answer for it." By the end of the week, Jade's platform wasn't just a tool, it was a movement. Front desk staff in Phoenix were using it. A group of black housekeepers in Atlanta had formed their own internal union after finding their erased complaints logged on the Ledger. A luxury hotel in Los Angeles issued a public apology and committed $5 million to staff equity programs, citing Jade's model as the reason. But it was a voicemail from an unexpected source that nearly broke her. It came in at 1:47 a.m. Jade. It's Miss Worthington. I used to manage your dorm floor, remember? Back at State. Jade paused. That name she hadn't heard in decades. I read what you're doing. I saw your speech in Zurich. Jade, I just wanted you to know we failed you back then. When the complaints were made about your professor, and we told you to let it go. You didn't let it go. You just waited. And now? Now we all hear you. Click. Jade sat alone in her office, eyes full, the city outside dark and silent. She didn't respond. She didn't need to. That night, she posted only one thing on her personal social media. It's never just about the room. It's about the roof, the walls, and the door they tried to close behind you. The post got shared over 4 million times in a week. And the next morning, Jade made her boldest move yet. She announced the formation of the Montgomery Equity Standard, a certification process for every hospitality group in America. Opt-in only. But public. Verified. Transparent. No one could be forced to join. But once the public saw who refused, they wouldn't need to be told. They'd know. Jade Montgomery stood in the center of a ballroom she once couldn't book a room in. Now it bore her name. The Montgomery Grand Equity Hall. Carved into black marble, gold-leafed, backlit by soft overhead lights. It wasn't the glamour that made it special. It was the silence that came with it. Respectful. Earned. Complete. Tonight wasn't a press event. It wasn't for social media. It was for the people who made the fight worth it. Her staff. Her elders. The workers who carried trays, cleaned rooms, filed silent complaints, and whispered to each other that maybe someday, someone would listen. Tonight, they were finally seen. A small jazz band played low near the entrance. Servers, all paid double overtime, moved among the guests with dishes curated from black-owned restaurants across Chicago. There were no name tags. No titles. No hierarchy. Jade stepped up to the podium without fanfare, in a deep blue suit with no jewelry, no notes, and nothing rehearsed. Just truth. I wasn't supposed to be here, she said. Not in this building. Not at this microphone. Not owning any of this. The crowd quieted. But I learned early that you can't wait for permission from people who never planned to invite you. There were nods from the older guests. Men who once wore uniforms and delivered mail. Women who raised 3 kids while working the night shift at hospitals that never offered them a pension. Jade looked around the room. They turned me away from a hotel room. I turned it into an open door. And that's what I want to talk about tonight. She took a breath. This week, I was offered the biggest buyout of my life. Van West. Consortium of 5 major hotel groups. $10 billion. A murmur. Jade held up a hand. I turned them down. The room froze. I didn't build this for exit. I built it for permanence. For the next woman who walks into a lobby and gets handed silence instead of service. For the next black executive mistaken for staff. For the janitor whose complaint was buried. For the father who lost his job for doing the right thing. Now she was getting emotional. Her voice cracked, just slightly. I built this so the next generation doesn't have to win by themselves. There was applause. It wasn't loud. It was steady. True. And it felt like rain on dry land. After the speech, an older gentleman in his 70s approached her. Dark suit. Thick hands. Eyes like someone who'd seen too much and carried most of it alone. He introduced himself as Vernon Taylor. Retired railroad engineer. Widowed. Grandfather of 7. I watched your story, he said. Made my grandson watch it too. He's 19. Wants to build something. Said he didn't know it was possible. I told him, now you do. Jade smiled softly. Thank you. Vernon wasn't finished. I just wanted to say, I'm proud of you, baby. Took us too long to see it. But you're the one. That's when Jade broke. The hug lasted long enough to carry the weight of 1,000 dismissed men and women who never got that moment for themselves. Later that night, alone in her office, she opened her father's file again. The one with the complaint that had cost him his job. She slipped it into a new folder labeled First Brick, because that's what it was. She understood now. He hadn't failed. He had begun. And now I want to speak directly to you. Yes, you, listening from wherever you are. Maybe you've sat in a waiting room while they skipped your name. Maybe you've been asked to prove who you are in your own neighborhood. Maybe you were told to settle, to be patient, to let it slide. I'm here to say what nobody said back then. You were never wrong for wanting dignity. You were never overreacting when you knew the difference between protocol and prejudice. And you were never too small to change the room. Because what Jade did wasn't just power. It was memory. It was the strength of everyone who held their tongue, hoping one day someone else wouldn't have to. So if this story moved you, share it. If you saw someone you love in this story, send it to them. And if you've ever been denied what you earned, listen closely. You're not waiting anymore. You've arrived. And they will never forget it again.